Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. And thank you for joining us today. We've got a great webinar on knowledge management and virtual agents, how large enterprises are saving millions in operational costs, improving the employee experience. And who better to talk about the topics than Dan Turchin, founder and CEO of PeopleReign, and Seth Earley, founder and CEO of Earley Information Science. I'm honored and pleased to moderate today's discussion. My name is Dave Scribella, Managing Director and Client Partner with Earley Information Science. And Seth, Dan, you want to say hello real quick?
Hey guys, Seth Earley, founder, CEO of Earley Information Science. Been in the space for over 25 years. And knowledge management and knowledge architecture, knowledge engineering are near and dear to my heart. It's where we started in our consulting business, and it's become more and more accepted and more powerful and embraced, especially these days when we start talking about digital assistants and virtual agents and automation. So it's a very exciting time for us to be in this space. I also, as you see, authored a book. I didn't have a co-author this time, AI-Powered Enterprise. And the first 10 people who want to send me an email, Seth@earley.com. It's right up there, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I will be happy to send you an autographed copy of that book.
That moves me.
Yes.
Thanks, Seth. Great to be here. Dan Turchin, and gosh, my life's passion is using technology, specifically AI and machine learning, to make humans better. And in fact, our name is no coincidence. We firmly believe that while technology is amazing, it is the case that people reign. So at least in my case, I've been in and around this space for about 25 years, started or been a founding employee at 7 companies, all applying the principles of AI and machine learning to improving work life. Our vision is bold, but we're making progress every day. We want to have a meaningful impact on improving work life for the next billion employees. That's how we're going to put a little dent in the universe, and it's a real passion for me and the whole team, and I'm looking forward to this discussion today.
And we're going to help you put that dent in the universe.
You bet.
So before we get started with today's conversation, just a few housekeeping notes. We want to first and foremost thank our media partners, CMS Wire and Marketing AI Institute, both great content sources for all things related to content management, digital and employee experience, and many other topics. So please check them out if you're not a regular reader already. We are recording today's session. The recording will be made available after the webinar. The session will be about 50 minutes. We want to make sure we've got some time for Q&A towards the end of the session, and your input is valued. We've got a couple of polls, and we very much encourage and want you to respond to each poll as we go through the session. A little bit more about EIS. We are a consultancy that is focused on helping some of the largest companies across many different industries organize their information, data, and knowledge for many purposes. That could be for selling more products, introducing new revenue streams, serving their customers more efficiently, serving their employees more effectively, improving that employee and customer experience, and also bringing new opportunities, new data and information assets to drive innovation faster. And you want to talk a little bit more about PeopleReign quickly?
PeopleReign is the SaaS platform that automates the delivery of IT and HR employee service for employees at large enterprises. I'll be sharing a lot of anecdotes about how our customers use PeopleReign. Companies venture-backed. We're based in Silicon Valley. We are a team of folks who are passionate about using technology to solve business problems, a team of ontologists and data scientists and AI experts who have come together to achieve this bold vision that we have.
Great. Thank you. So our agenda for discussion today, we want to talk about AI and artificial intelligence depends on IA, information architecture. So, how those two things are very much interrelated. We're going to get Seth and Dan's thoughts there. We're going to look at some of the components of information architecture, how they tie into some of the work that Dan is doing and some of the ways in which we're building knowledge solutions and enhancing and improving that employee experience. Domain ontologies and intent detection. process analysis and understanding, what are the ways to start analyzing processes across the enterprise to help build knowledge and drive knowledge solutions. As you think about doing work and, investing in projects, what are some of the ways in which you can measure return on investment, improvement, and impact? So we'll talk about baseline measures and success metrics. And if you're not sure where to start, we're going to help you there. We're going to, talk about where to get started, and certainly want to talk about scheduling an AI briefing with your team if interested. So we want to start with our first poll here. We're going to talk a lot about employee experience. Want to know from the folks on the webinar today, how important is employee experience for the organization? Would you consider it not a priority? Is it important, but not necessarily resourced the right way? Are there actual, success stories, departmental initiatives in flight? Is the employee experience a real priority at sort of the senior levels of the organization with the right amount of funding and attention? Or maybe you don't know, and it's a none of the above. We'll just give this a minute. As Seth likes to say, the popcorn is popping.
Yes, it takes a little while. Pan has to heat up. Brains have to get going here. Like, wait a minute, I didn't know there was going to be a quiz. Offer the question, give me information before you ask me questions. But this will be helpful just to understand where you guys are. If it's none of the above, let us know in your chat or your question answer panel. So you can ask a question in the QA panel, and but you can give us that information. You can help us understand. If it's none of the above, why is it none of the above? What's the other choice that we missed? So people are saying it's a priority, not necessarily resourced. Many times these things are difficult to get funded because it is difficult to demonstrate ROI. So we're going to talk about that. We'll give you another couple of moments to put in your answer. I think we could love to hear more from you guys, but if you're not answering, maybe we will leave you be and perhaps end the poll. So it looks like the majority are saying that it is, you have to click that share button. Sorry, we stepped on each other. Important, but not resourced. And that's interesting. A lot of departmental initiatives. Corporate priority, that's great. One of you has as corporate priority. It should be a priority. And many times these inefficiencies that employees experience really do ripple throughout the organization. And one of the things we're going to talk about is how beginning with narrow focus in a narrow domain can show ROI and can start catalyzing other opportunities for improvement. And did we get something in the Q&A?
There's a question here. It is simply 3.
The 3, or maybe it's number 3. Maybe they could.
Yeah.
Maybe their choice is 3. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So we'll add one more to the scoreboard.
So let's start with AI and IA, artificial intelligence and information architecture. What is the role of information architecture as companies are thinking about AI and its application inside of the employee experience? What does information architecture entail? And what is it when a vendor says something around, just let the software get implemented and it will start working without kind of a concerted effort to think about the organization and underlying information architecture? Should we trust them?
Well, I can start off with some thoughts about information architecture. I did write an article a number of years ago called "There's no AI without IA." There's no artificial intelligence without information architecture. That was actually quoted by Ginny Rometty when she was the CEO of IBM at Davos, Switzerland, when she was asked a question about, why is it taking longer for organizations to adopt AI? And she basically said, look, there's a funny saying in our industry, and she explained it and said, it really is about the data. It is really about the architecture. Many times the data is more important than the algorithm. The algorithm is important, but if the algorithm doesn't have the data, it's not going to be effective. And that data does need to be curated in certain instances, especially when we talk about digital assistants, virtual assistants, cognitive assistants, whatever we want to call them. The purpose of those tools are to reduce the cognitive load on the human. How does it do that? Well, it tries to interpret a request or a question, an utterance. I have a problem. I'm locked out of my computer. My password doesn't work. I forgot my username. My system's mad at me. All sorts of ways of expressing a problem. Those all have to be classified into an intent, and that intent is really the thing that they're trying to get at. And that then is used to query or request a piece of information. Chatbots are a channel. So if we don't have the data, we don't have the content, we don't have the knowledge, those things aren't going to be able to produce it. We need to have that information somewhere because they are information retrieval mechanisms. Dan, do you want to expound on that?
Yeah, one of the things that we like to say is voice is the new app and AI is the new UI. And in fact, all AI, artificial intelligence, really comes down to a data problem. And the way we solve that data problem is with an information architecture. And it's kind of a wonky term, isn't it? But really, information architecture is a proxy for what's probably more commonly referred to as data hygiene. Mm-hmm. So the way that artificial intelligence learns from content is by how the content is structured. And something we'll be kind of foreshadowing, a discussion that we'll have in a bit is about how you improve your data hygiene and how do you know where to start? Because every enterprise is going to say, my information, my knowledge content, my knowledge base is either incomplete or inconsistent. That would make you normal. The thing that's encouraging to me is that 5 out of 9 of the respondents to the first poll said employee experience matters. It's important, even though it may or may not be resourced. Most of this discussion is going to be a conversation around how to turn maybe a nascent IA strategy into a strategy that directly benefits or improves your employee experience. And we'll be connecting those and giving you some actionable tips for how to improve your IA as an input into your AI strategy.
The other thing, the other comment or the other question here is, sometimes vendors will say you don't need that. Our system does it all. I'm not sure if they're saying that as much these days because I think it's so implausible, and the market is getting more sophisticated. Many organizations realize that if a vendor makes that statement, they're really giving you an incomplete picture because either they're saying that they have already made those decisions about the functionality. So they've kind of baked in some kind of information architecture, but it is never going to be complete without your information architecture being resolved without your content being structured in a way that aligns with how you're going to retrieve it. So I think if a vendor says that, they're saying, we've already made those decisions, but here's the problem. If you take an application that is generic, right? They've built an IA that applies to everybody, so you don't have to do it. You don't have any competitive differentiation, right? You have to think about standard. If it's standardized across lots of organizations or an industry, that's great. That'll give you efficiency. And there are standard domain models for an industry, or there are typical domain models for an industry, but they have to be refined to your specific processes, your content, and your work practices. Because otherwise, a generic solution is not going to be able to solve your problem. So you can have a starting point that covers a lot of intents, which is part of what PeopleReign offers, but we still have to look at the content and the data and the knowledge that's going to be behind that query. When someone says, I need to do the following thing, well, your process will be different than someone else's process. That is really where the value is. It's understanding that architecture, that data, that content, the knowledge, so that people have a standard way of getting to that. And they don't have to go through acts of heroics. They don't have to, phone a friend. They don't have to send multiple emails around. You'll find that a lot of these processes are very repeatable. And so if we build the right architecture, we can offload many of those tasks to self-service or to a bot. But it does depend on, number one, understanding what that user is asking for. And there's an architecture there. There's intent identification and classification from an utterance, and where that knowledge is, where that data is, where that content is, and that it's structured in a way that it pulls the system, retrieves the right information for that specific intent for that specific problem.
So how much IA has to be in place for a company to start with their AI program?
Dan, do you want to
I'll take that? Yeah.
Please.
Customer stories always speak volumes. So here's one that answers Dave's question. So a global retail organization in the footwear and athletic apparel space uses PeopleReign to improve self-service adoption of their good content and also improve internal adoption of their service catalog. And the problem they had is they had a lot of content, but really weak IA. It was poorly organized. And so they had the problem of 55,000 employees in their case doing what they called showrooming the self-service portal, where the employees would go and try to find what they were looking for. They could never find it. And so they'd call the help desk or send an email. So the least efficient channel was being used as a substitute for the most efficient channel, self-service. And what they got in the form of the PeopleReign system of intelligence was a way to automate the improvement of the hygiene or the improvement of their IA, their information architecture. And ultimately, within the first 3 months of going live with PeopleReign, with a combination of semantic search or concept-based search on top of their self-service portal, all of a sudden, those 55,000 employees were able to find what they were looking for much more efficiently. Call volume dropped by 2/3. That's within the first 3 months of deploying it. Employees reported they were much happier with the content, much easier to find answers to their questions. And it required zero investment in content because the content was all there. It just required an investment of knowing how to disseminate that information in the form of better answers, easier to discover through semantic search on top of a traditional self-service portal. And so that was an example of how, one customer's journey, the objective was delivering a better employee experience, and the process involved making it easier to find and consume and use content that was already there, even though their IA was poor. A little bit of a system of intelligence expose the value of that content to their global employee base.
So you're saying they had reasonably good content hygiene and they had quality content, but part of it was the inconsistency in how things were named or employees not knowing how to ask the question to get that particular piece of information. So that's where by aligning that intent with the content, by saying, we know the answer is there, but here's 10 different ways that employee may ask for that question. If they don't ask for it exactly the right way in the old system, they won't get the information. But now we're giving them flexibility to ask it in a way that's more natural in terms of the language they would choose, natural language, and then that conversational request can be responded to by the system based on the content that they had. So it's really that upfront piece to say, here are all the different variations and how you might ask for this. Let's resolve that to a specific intent, and then that intent gets mapped to content.
Yeah, I'll give you a very concrete example. This particular organization I mentioned had a employee handbook. It was a 35-page PDF. And so frequently a self-service knowledge-based search would yield that as the top search result. That helped exactly no one.
TLDR.
Exactly right, TLDR. So PeopleReign was able to extract, believe it or not, over 900 discrete answers to questions that mapped content in the 35-page PDF to intents that employees actually had. And all of a sudden, the content in that employee handbook was now exposed to employees using natural language. That's an example of where the content existed, but the user experience was abominable until they wrapped a layer of semantic search around their content, thus dramatically improving their IA by applying the principles of AI.
And breaking that content up into specific answers. I mean, the fact that there's 900 answers in there, that's incredible. And when you think about that, that means people, when people are doing a search or a query, they don't want a list of 100 documents. And then one of those documents is a 35-page PDF, right? They want the answer, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to that specific answer by understanding that question, understanding the different variations of that question, and then classifying that to a specific utterance that will ask the question in such a way that it pulls back that one piece of information that is of value.
Okay, so now that we've set the groundwork for a little bit of where you are in your AI journey, let's take a look at this poll. So want to know, now we talked about IA as a foundational step or concept for AI. Where are people with their AI programs? No experience, limited POCs, which are proofs of concept at the departmental or maybe functional level. Is it operationalized and really embedded into what a team or department is doing? Is it operationalized at the enterprise level, which really means it's, you know, at scale and serving value across the organization in ways that are measurable and meaningful?
So popcorn is popping a little faster this time. We got a flurry of kernels going there. Any more feedback? I don't see anybody saying fully operationalized at the enterprise level. That's not unusual. Again, for the none of the above, I know some people are not working currently but researching their next position. Maybe that's the reason. If there's another reason, you can let us know in the Q&A tab. But let's see. So go ahead. Do you want to share results? There we go. So again, limited POCs, right? Limited POCs, some that are no experience at all, which is interesting. I mean, a lot of companies are experimenting. Dan, any thoughts on this type of result?
Exactly what I'd expect. Exactly what we see anecdotally in the field. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of curiosity. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes organizations just need a little push in the right direction, and sometimes some kind of automation layer to accelerate some of these good ideas that they have.
Yeah, and again, a lot of it is based on what is the business value that these AI initiatives are providing. Many times, people have pilots and POCs. It's difficult to go to deployment because the pilot or the POC is done in a sandbox where you have the opportunity to kind of really curate that knowledge or that content or that data, to cleanse it, to make sure it's complete. And then you go to deploy this in a production environment, like, whoa, we don't have that same luxury. They say data scientists spend a lot of time being data janitors, right? Cleaning up information, cleaning up the content. So this is not surprising. And, it is very difficult to then justify the investment that's needed to do that content and data hygiene. However, as we're going to show you and as we're discussing, there are ways to jumpstart that in a way that can then justify other initiatives and be able to help go back and clean up more of the content and expand the knowledge program. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. How do we go from a POC to something that's more operationalized?
So let's turn now to knowledge concepts, important ones, right? Domains and ontologies, and how do ontologies help knowledge management and AI programs? I know you guys both have a lot of perspectives here, so where do we start with our domain thinking?
Dan, do you want to start?
So domain ontologies are essentially structured vocabularies, and in the primary domains in which PeopleReign operates, IT and HR employee service, here's an example of how to think about the value of a domain ontology. So PeopleReign on day 0 delivers domain ontologies that consists of about 5 million interrelated concepts that essentially is the world's definitive repository for how IT and HR service is requested and delivered. And it's nice to have a 5 million question and answer head start when you embark on the journey, because like we saw in the last poll, 8 out of the 13 respondents said, you either haven't started or you kind of have limited scope POCs. Well, you could imagine how, getting an immediate boost of kind of this, definitive library of how this, language is correlated is a big advantage. So the domain ontology, here's a good way to think about the value. An employee comes in and, asks for help with an airport, let's say. Now to you or I, we may first think of the facility out of which planes fly. But to an employee in the context of requesting IT help, a a domain ontology can help understand that that's more likely a product from a manufacturer called Apple. And that product called the airport is more likely to do with Wi-Fi connectivity. And there are certain kinds of issues that are related to Wi-Fi and connectivity. And those immediately go from kind of an abstract, somewhat ambiguous concept, but using the domain ontology and fanning that single term out to all of the related concepts and terms, and more important, solutions, takes an ambiguous question and turns it into an answer, and specifically something that's actionable via automation. So all of a sudden, rather than providing directions to the nearest place where planes fly from, the virtual agent is able to use the domain ontology and this vast knowledge of concepts about Wi-Fi and connectivity to jump into a mode where it's diagnosing and resolving an employee's issue. So it's an example of within the internal employee support space, what a domain ontology is, and specifically how you can think about the value of sitting on top of an existing kind of vast repository of related concepts. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And when you start thinking of domains, so domain could be a functional area within an organization. At a higher level, you can have a domain that is industry specific. So you have industry domains. So pharmaceutical and life sciences is going to be very different than manufacturing, right? Life sciences will have biochemical targets and mechanisms of action and indications and diseases and generic compounds and protocols and so on. Whereas a manufacturing organization will have manufacturing processes. They'll have, technical they'll have technical terminology related to their specific products. They'll talk about distribution, quality control. There'll be a whole bunch of other things that will not be. And you could say pharmaceutical has manufacturing, but if we talk about, a 3M or a Honeywell, they're very, very different terms. Or an insurance company is going to be very different than manufacturing or pharmaceuticals and financial services. Again, they have their own unique languages, their lexicons, their glossaries, and then the relationships between them. So as you could hear from Dan's example, being in the right domain to say we're in IT versus, we're a broad, domain about travel is saying that we can very easily hone in on the correct sense of that term, because terms are ambiguous and they have different meanings. So we want to be able to get to that domain ontology, which has those concepts and relationships. And then there will be specific things about your organization that will, again, have a finer degree of granularity about your specific processes, about your content, about your types of initiatives and the processes that you use for supporting customers or doing DevOps or whatever that might be. So the ontology is really critical to this because it helps to interpret the concepts and the related concepts, as Dan was saying. You have that concept of airport and then Wi-Fi and then Wi-Fi problems. All of those are part of that domain model so that you can begin to interpret what a user is asking for and then bringing them to exactly the right content that they need.
Seth, Andrew asks in the chat, how are domain ontologies managed? And if it's okay, I'll give a quick answer. Andrew, one of the primary tools, you'd asked about tools to structure and manage ontologies is what's called a graph database. So at PeopleReign, we happen to manage or structure our domain ontologies for IT and HR in a tool called Neo4j. And it's a nice SQL-based backend, but it's specifically designed to be able to capture the structure of a domain ontology where you have parent and child concepts. The concepts are linked, and you can actually query that knowledge graph based on some number of degrees of separation from a core concept, like airport, for example. You can visualize all of the nodes that are related to a concept like airport and visually see how dense the network of concepts is related to that parent term. And it also, as a developer or as an owner of that ontology, graph database tools with visualization capabilities, Neo4j being just one, provide a good construct for being able to organize all that information.
I like to say that the ontology, and again, the pre-built ontology from a tool like PeopleReign can give you a lot of value right away. But there's even greater value when you start expanding that ontology to cover your unique IP, your unique knowledge and your knowledge assets, right? Because it's going to be broader when you start looking at, very specific types of processes or products that are unique, that are very different than other companies' products, or there's processes that are different, or knowledge assets that are going to be different. Those need to be part of an extension of the domain model. In other words, your ontology is going to be specified at a much more detailed and granular level to cover your unique processes, your unique knowledge assets, problems that you solve, even customer data models, all of those things. And so I like to say that the ontology is the knowledge scaffolding of the organization. And again, when you have common processes, you want to be able to leverage a common domain model and ontology that covers that. And then that needs to expand to cover the things that are very unique about your business so that you can have a place for all of your knowledge. A tool like PeopleReign isn't going to solve every knowledge problem you have. It'll produce value. So I like to call it the excuse case, right? It's the use case that gives you the excuse to make the investment. It's justifiable. And then you can start to build other capabilities that are going to help across the entire organization with day-to-day operational types of questions and knowledge access, right? We compete on knowledge, knowledge of our customers, knowledge of our solutions, knowledge of our competitors, right? So that knowledge does need to be managed in a consistent way. What this gives you the opportunity to do is to jumpstart that process with a very clear, powerful ROI that then shows the value to the organization. That's why organizations don't make some of these investments, because they have difficulty showing ROI. When you have that ROI, it's like water going downhill. There will be more investment because it is so valuable, but it's proving out, it's getting those proof points to begin that process, which can then be extended, and built. Does that make sense, Dan?
100%.
And thanks for the question, Andrew. Okay, so let's talk about then how domain ontologies really help to build that scaffolding around knowledge and knowledge management. So last poll today, where is the knowledge management program? What is the state inside of your company, your organization? Is it a mess? Are there instances of success or adoption, but they're siloed? Enterprise level adoption to support specific knowledge processes. Maybe that's in customer support and service. Maybe that's in employee learning and development, maybe somewhere else.
I'm surprised no one is saying knowledge is a mess. There's usually someone that says, oh, there we go.
Oh, there you go.
I'm not
solicited at all.
I'm not disappointed, but usually there are many messy processes, and maybe the knowledge is a mess in a particular area. Maturity is lumpy, right? You get pockets of good practices in an organization, and sometimes when we go in and we try to do, when we try to help an organization with their knowledge process, we do a maturity assessment to kind of understand, well, where are the pockets of really good practices, and how can we expand that to other parts of the organization? When we do a project such as one with PeopleReign, it's saying that is going to be the best practice. That is the thing that can then be expanded to other departments and processes. But usually it's lumpy. Usually, there are some parts of the organization that have a great handle on their knowledge because maybe it's an engineering organization, software development. Maybe they have good repositories because it's so critical to the business. But then there are other areas that are lacking. And what we want to do is be holistic about our view of knowledge in the organization so that we can have lots of efficiencies.
Okay,
Seth, I don't think I've ever met an organization that said, you know what, our knowledge management function is mature. We're all good there. The content's complete and it's all consistent, right? So
right. Not across the organization, maybe in a silo, right? Maybe in a silo, maybe a knowledge base, but you're right. Nobody has said that they are mature across the enterprise. Absolutely not.
To all the attendees, if you're at least demonstrating that you value knowledge hygiene because you're attending this this webcast, it means you're a step ahead of most.
That's right. You're aware of the problem.
All right. So let's now take a look at process analysis. When we're looking at building out knowledge programs and solutions, where do we start with, looking at existing processes, thinking about, the right fit of technology and virtual assistants or AI to those processes? Can we talk a little bit about, how an organization should decide if something like a virtual agent, a virtual assistant is the right solution to a business problem, and how it can marry up the concepts we talked about before?
Let me start with that, and I'll turn it over to Dan. And one of the things that we look for are repeatable, unambiguous processes, right? What are the things that people are doing over and over again? What are the questions that the help desk is getting over and over again? What are the questions people are asking each other over and over again? And what are things that you can have a clearly defined outcome? So what is that problem or that process that is clear, unambiguous, repeatable, right? Because when you start to get into more complex problem solving, many times you do need human judgment. But one of the things you can do with that is you facilitate the knowledge retrieval with a bot that can support the human in a more complex process. So part of it is saying, what are those processes? I like to say you can't automate a mess and you can't automate what you don't understand, right? So mapping those processes, understanding them, and understanding what the baselines are. There measures in place? If it's a call center or help desk, time per incident, right? First time resolution, customer satisfaction. Those are some. It's going to talk about a couple more, but the idea is to say we have baselines. The amount of service adoption. Do we have baselines that will indicate how well we're doing currently, and then what are those things that need to be or can be offloaded or handled more effectively in self-service or by a virtual assistant? And again, those are the things that. I show a 2x2 graph where there's the complexity of the domain on one axis and the complexity of the task or the dialogue on another axis. And what you don't want to do is start in the upper right-hand quadrant where it's a complex domain and complex tasks. Like, IBM Watson trying to solve cancer at MD Anderson Cancer Center. Well, that was a really tough problem. They solved a lot of more unambiguous tasks like logistics, and helping families do certain things, but they failed on the more complex stuff. But what we can do is we can build virtual assistants that will make the knowledge readily available for people to apply their judgment. But for the things that we want to automate completely, those are the things that are clear, they're definable, they're repeatable, they're unambiguous, and that we have a specific process for. Dan, do you want to expand on that?
Here's a little pro tip. If at any point you find yourself asking, is a virtual agent right for our organization? You've already gone astray. And here's why I say that. A virtual agent's a technology, and I want you to first get really comfortable finding a business problem. So I guarantee you that any project that starts with a technology will fail. Most projects that start with a business problem will succeed. And I'll give you a framework, kind of 5 telltale signs that your organization or that the business may be in a good state where it's ready for a virtual agent. These all have nothing to do with a virtual agent per se. So number 1, so if you're hearing from the business, we want to reduce the mean time to resolve issues, or the MTTR. A virtual agent can be a really good way to automate the resolution of common requests. Number 2, we're looking to reduce the cost per contact. So we want to be able to shift left, what we call in the industry, all of the requests or the burden from an expensive support channel, which is on the right, a live agent, email, phone, etc., all the way left to self-service. Telltale sign, a virtual agent may be in your future. Number 3, we want to reduce the call volume. So without having to staff up in the call center, we want to be able to accommodate a higher volume of employee requests, or we want to be able to reduce the volume of staff in the call center and maintain the same level of quality across the same volume of calls. In either case, virtual agent's a good fit. Number 4, we're looking to improve adoption of our self-service capability. Like the example of the organization I shared previously, they had a self-service portal. It was so Byzantine in its complexity that nobody used it. The call volume actually didn't go down. But if the business is saying we want to improve the adoption of a self-service portal, good fit for a virtual agent, good fit for semantic search, good fit for domain ontologies. And then last, and perhaps most important, if the business is saying we want to improve employee satisfaction, let's say you sample customers after they submit tickets and you ask them, how satisfied they were. Well, if those are numbers, or if that's a key performance indicator that you want to improve, telltale sign that a virtual agent may be in your future, because the experience of getting support from an automated channel with great answers and the ability to diagnose and resolve issues for common questions, a virtual agent that gets smarter all the time, a virtual agent that, at least in the case of PeopleReign, speaks 27 languages fluently, never gets tired, never takes a break. It's a vastly superior experience. So those are the 5 indicators that the business is ready for a virtual agent. But never start the project by saying, I've got this vision of a technology and I want to try to find a fit for it in the organization. Flip that on its head, figure out what the business is asking for, and then see if a virtual agent technology that delivers a better employee experience is a good fit to solve a business problem.
So with that in mind, have you ever encountered a client that can express those problems, but can't necessarily give you real baseline metrics? There are no measurable systems or ways to capture that. So you have to kind of start anecdotally. Is that a fair way to start, or is that really a risky proposition?
We'll always help the customer back into a baseline metric, and oftentimes that's in the form of doing what at PeopleReign we call an AI data analysis. So we'll first help them figure out what the metrics are that matter by introspecting their data. And typically over the course of about 5 days, we can help them unlock the answers that are trapped in their data. And what the AI data analysis reveals is things like, what issue types are leading to dissatisfied customers? Where is your MTTR? When your MTTR spirals out of control, let's say, on average, it's actually an industry metric. On average, it takes about 2.5 hours to resolve every IT issue. Well, why is that the case? The AI data analysis can go and unpack which types of issues are leading to those elongated MTTR, mean times to resolve issues, and help you understand, even though you may not actively track those KPIs, those key performance indicators, the AI data analysis helps you understand what those baseline metrics are, because they're trapped in your own historical data.
Yeah, and it does come back to understanding that process and understanding, and everything should be measurable. And if they're not measurable, when they're not being measured today, then they need to be instrumented, and we can capture baselines pretty quickly, right? It doesn't take a long time to capture a baseline. Should be measured, but if they're not, those metrics can be installed. And it really is about understanding that process and looking at where in that process can we have an intervention that is going to reduce the friction or improve the efficiency or the effectiveness of the flow, right? So there may still be a human involved in one part. There still may be a human involved in another part, but there may be a place where you're really automating and bringing efficiency to a specific piece of the process. So that's why, the process analysis is so important. And what we're looking for, the things that are repeatable and unambiguous, right? There's a clear outcome. We have a process for it. We have the content for it. We know people are asking these questions. They're asking them on an ongoing basis. And those are the types of things that, form the foundation of those use cases that are the break and sticks. It's the knock it out of the park ones, right? Those are the things that can be done. But again, it takes a little bit of time to understand that data. It takes a little time to make sure that we have the right baselines, and then tuning the content as necessary.
Okay, so my favorite topic. I'd like to get started. You both have a wealth of experience in this area. Where do we begin?
Dan, you want to begin with the beginning? Begin with the beginning?
Listen to the voice of your employees. They'll tell you everything you need to know when it comes to delivering a better employee experience. And in poll one, most of you said that's something that is of interest. Listen to what they're saying. So more than ever, we're hearing kind of macro trends indicating employees are feeling kind of disengaged. They're feeling less motivated, less valued by their employer. Well, when we think about what it is that makes an employee feel less motivated, less engaged, it's not purely work from home, or, it's not purely a specific office policy. A lot of times what it is feeling like when I have a question or when I have an issue, it takes too long to answer, to get routine questions answered. Or, you know what, it really frustrates me that every time I have a question, I'm asked the same question multiple times. And, whether it's in our personal lives and we get put on hold or treated like a robot by our credit card company or, the airline or, the cable company, it's really demeaning experience. And where should you begin? Well, begin by thinking about a way to humanize the service experience, because humanizing the service experience is what is going to make your employees feel trusted and valued and respected. Another key cry for pain that you might hear from employees, if you listen carefully enough, is, I'm not based near headquarters anymore. I moved. I'm in another country. I'm traveling a lot. And, I no longer feel like a first-class citizen because, the call center is not available when I need it. And so one good way to think about the value of automation or the value of a virtual agent or the value of unlocking the power in your knowledge content or in your enterprise content repository is by thinking about how to disseminate it better using natural language, making sure it's available in whatever language your employees speak, making sure it's always available, make sure the ability of your system of intelligence continuously improves so that it's constantly learning, not just new skills, but it's mapping new acronyms and new terms and new ways that employees ask for questions or ask for answers in the form of better NLP, not just NLP, but NLU, natural language understanding. But it all starts by just a genuine interest in listening to and really hearing what your employees want to be able to feel more trusted, valued, and respected at work. I'd say that any AI or even any IA project really needs to make that the foundational principle.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. It's really the voice of the employee, just like the voice of the customer. Your customer is your internal customer, your employee. Your employee is as important a customer because they're the ones that are enabling the customer experience, right? And if their day is frustrating and full of friction, and it's difficult for them to get answers and difficult for them to get routine information, or as Dan is mentioning, that they feel dehumanized because they're maybe calling a help desk that, again, is asking those same questions over and over. And, there's long holds, there's waits, there's slow turnaround, and it's interesting to think that you can humanize that experience with technology, with automation, right? We're saying humanize it with a virtual assistant. And the reason why that's more because you're treating people with more respect, you're responding more quickly to their problems and their needs, and giving them the opportunity to connect at higher level problem solving, right? Not the routine stuff that people don't like to do anyway. I mean, the call center and help desk people don't want to answer those questions over and over and over again. That makes them crazy. They'd rather be able to engage and solve more sophisticated problems. And so that is something that we're helping remove the drudgery for the internal support people. But when you think about all the information flows in an enterprise, when you have friction in any of those places, it really slows the entire set of processes down. We're trying to speed up the information metabolism of the organization and get people answers more quickly, more relevantly, more easily. And what that does is it lets them get on with their day, right? It doesn't slow them down. But there's so many sources of friction that people don't recognize in an organization because it's just the way they've always done it. right? It's just
Yep.
we always email back and forth these documents. We always have problems finding the latest one. That's just our process, right? It's messy, it's chaotic. We don't necessarily have a good structure for doing this stuff. But again, starting with this set of processes can be such a clear value proposition that it can start to show where there are other places where there's opportunity, other friction points that can be removed. And again, when you remove these friction points and you make information flow more easily, that benefits everybody. It helps you get to market faster. It helps you solve problems and deal with competitive threats. It helps you understand your customers more effectively. It helps you develop solutions. All of those things speed up and are benefited when we are solving these foundational problems.
I want to quickly put a pin. There's a great question in the Q&A, but before we get to that, just either one of you, who should be on the bus, to really help support and build these employee experience and KM programs?
3 key stakeholders. 1, the owner of the tool. So typically there's a system of record. There might be a knowledge repository, maybe even a graph database, but whoever owns the tool is a key stakeholder. 2, whoever owns the process. So whatever the process is of delivering that service to the employee. And then 3, you want at least 1, we'll call them a power user or a representative, someone who provides the voice of the customer as an input to the process. Those are the 3 key stakeholders that will make any IA plus AI project successful.
I would also say that maybe they don't need to be fully engaged, but they should be kept aware or help to validate the metrics, and that maybe someone from the finance organization who can really quantify things, right? So that executives, when they see these ROI projections or they see this data, they trust it, right? Someone in finance can put their stamp of approval on it. So they don't necessarily need to be part of the whole thing, but they should be. You should collaborate with them and consult with them so that they go, yep, this is real.
So to get started, if you're just getting started, or maybe you're stuck and want to get unstuck, or maybe you just want to get some direct engagement with Seth and Dan, we would like to invite you in to schedule a briefing. There's a link here. We will have that link in the follow-up email, so don't worry if you don't copy that down right now.
Can we also drop it in? Can we drop it in for everybody? Is this
sure
audience to Sharon? Or is that
yeah, we do encourage you to schedule a 30-minute call and talk about some of the things we've been talking about today and understand, where to go next.
Yeah, I'm just curious if the attendees are seeing that link that I just sent out.
Yep.
Is that just going to us or is that going to everybody?
That goes to everybody.
Goes to everybody? Okay, we got some thumbs up on that. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and
you sent it to everyone. Yes.
Okay, I sent it to everyone. All right, so click on that, guys, and schedule a briefing, and we can spend more time with you digging into these things and answer questions.
Okay, let's get to this question from Michael in the Q&A. I think we should go to the root of helping employees automate their own work and work processes. How can we get agents that help mediate, facilitate, templatize how our people can automate what they want to automate to make their work lives and workflows better and more efficient for them? All counts.
I can take that. It starts with the right incentive systems. And Michael, it's a really good question. So this is a very human process. We oftentimes get fixated on the technology, but it's a very human process. And at least at PeopleReign, one of the key widgets that you get in the PeopleReign Insights product is a leaderboard that shows how your live agents are most benefiting the employee experience. And so it looks at a variety of metrics, including when a live agent answers a question, how frequently is their support correlated with the best service metrics, things like higher customer sat scores and lower MTTR or mean time to resolve issues. So by essentially gamifying the process of improving the employee experience and involving the live agents by making them feel like they're active participants in the process of delivering a better service experience for employees, you get everybody committed to achieving the same vision. And so it really starts with putting the right incentive systems in place, and then, of course, gathering the right information to be able to reward success where it's achieved.
Great, thank you. Question coming in from Audrey. What metrics would you use to measure the success of a chatbot project? Seth, you want to take that?
Well, sure. I mean, I think, again, it comes back to what are we trying to enable, right? What part of the process are we trying to? You could, for example, leverage a virtual assistant or a chatbot in a sales process or proposal development process, or an engineering process, by using it to retrieve knowledge that people need to solve those problems, right? Those are getting into more complex, higher order of difficulty types of problems, but it would depend on the process that we're trying to support. Remember, we need to do that process analysis, understand what types of things people are encountering day to day that's slowing them down, and then there are the help desk metrics around mean time to resolution, first call resolution, customer satisfaction, those types of metrics to say how quickly, self-service adoption, how quickly are we getting people to the answers that they need in routine things. But then again, when you're looking at more complex knowledge retrieval, things that require judgment, we use the same principles. The same principles can be applied to any knowledge base, right? What we're trying to do is understand what people's intent is, and intent can contain multiple dimensions. So we could be looking for, materials that help us with a proposal development. Maybe we need bios, maybe we need, prior proposals or templates or case studies. Those types of things can be made more readily available using these types of technologies. And then what you're looking at is, well, what is that overall process that requires these manual steps that I can, again, make more efficient or improve? Dan, do you want to add to that?
Great answer. Nothing to add, Seth.
Okay, one last question we're going to sneak in here. So hopefully we get a quick answer on this one. What segment is doing really well, moving through and evolving toward competing on employee experience? So employee experience is the differentiator.
What do you mean by segment?
I guess that would be an industry.
Industry type of organization. Yeah.
The nice thing about the employee experience is that when you think about IT, HR, finance, facilities, et cetera, those cross all horizontals. So whether you're in manufacturing or consumer packaged goods or retail, education, healthcare, et cetera, you all share a common vision. Every industry shares a common vision for delivering an optimized employee experience. So I wouldn't say it has to do with a horizontal business domain as much as it has to do with organizations that place a high value on delivering a superior employee experience are the ones who dramatically outperform their peers in every key metric.
And I would add to that in that there are some verticals that are making greater investments in AI and maybe have more of an appetite to experiment or push the envelope or try new things. In some cases, they may be, financial services, insurance, life sciences. They're doing more experimentation. Manufacturing might be a little bit behind, but all of them can benefit, as Dan says, from these very practical approaches. But there may be some, because they are generally looking at AI and machine learning for competitive advantage in other areas, have a greater appetite, or at least greater risk tolerance to do these types of things. But these are low risk. These are very low risk. These are things that there's a shared risk model to say, if you're not getting value, you don't have to make the investment. So it's really it's kind of a guaranteed ROI.
Some additional reading. We've got plenty of thoughts on the topics we covered today. So please, we encourage you to check out both eisearly.com and PeopleReign.io for more content and materials. And we also encourage, if you haven't, Early AI podcast. We've got some great guests recently, including Dan. And I think Seth has also been on Dan's podcast. So
there's go flip to Dan's podcast, because that's Future of Work.
Perfect. Yes. And I highly encourage both podcasts for people that need more listening. And with that, thank you everyone for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week.